All right, a very good morning. So it's already 9 a.m. I think we should start. We already have 33 attendees. All right, honorable directors of polytechnics and community colleges, our distinguished speaker for today, lecturers from polytechnics and community colleges, webinar participants, the dedicated organizing team behind the TVET Digital Revolution, Innovative Teaching and Learning for Industry Changes due to Industry 4.0 webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Welcome to day 3 of the TVET Digital Revolution, Innovative Teaching and Learning for Industry Changes due to Industry 4.0 webinar. Firstly, let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Umawathy, and I am from the Instructional Unit, Instructional and Digital Learning Division, Department of Polytechnic and Community College Education. I'm speaking to you live from our SAT studio here in Putrajaya. Before we start, I would like to invite everyone to recite the dua together and observe a moment of silence to seek for blessings from the Almighty for the success of our webinar today. Distinguished webinar participants, Malaysia needs to evolve and innovate continuously in order to become a digital nation that is prosperous and resilient. Digitalization, technology adoption, and innovation are essential in ensuring sustainable economic growth. Now, in the 12th Malaysia Plan, Policy Enabler 2, Chapter 11, Boosting Digitalization and Advanced Technology, focuses on accelerating digitalization and promoting the adoption of new and advanced technology in all sectors. This means the supply of talent and skills required to drive both the digital economy and 4IR technology adoption will be increased, while R&D will be increased as well. A strong TVET ecosystem will be a game changer that will create future-ready talent in meeting industry demand. Now, allow me to recap the incredible sessions we had yesterday for just a couple of minutes for the benefit of those who have just joined us today. So yesterday morning, we started off the webinar series with two experienced gentlemen with us, Mr. Ng Hui Min from Festo Sdn Bhd Malaysia and Mr. Fu Tek Kong from Festo Didaktik Asia Pacific, who's based in Singapore, and they shared with us the potential of Festo LX, their learning management system in TVET education. They showcased how Festo LX has nuggets which allow students to experience simulations to increase their understanding on concepts of various topics that students may struggle with in campus, such as pneumatics and hydraulics. Next, we had Associate Professor Dr. Kata Binjago, the Associate Professor of Entrepreneurship in the Department of Technical and Engineering Education, who shared a bit on how students need to prepare for the industrial workforce. Finally, we had Associate Professor T.S. Dr. Muhammad Safari Nurdin from the same department as Associate Professor Dr. Kata Binjago at UTN, and he shared with us on assessment of students' performance in the era of the digitalized world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the complexity of 21st century work is rooted in expertise. Now, and as the word implies, expertise grows out of experience. In fact, psychologists who studied experts in sports, music, and strategy games like chess have found that people require about 10 years of sustained and focused practice to reach the highest levels of competency in any domain. However, today's organizations don't have 10 years to grow expertise, and some skills, such as reacting to emergencies, demand practice before the real situation arises. So, are there some ways to accelerate expertise outside of normal job experience? Now, are there some training techniques to turn a compliance meeting into a more relevant and engaging experience? Now, the pertinent question here is, how can we make learning more meaningful for students? Now, one answer is scenario-based e-learning, which allows the learner to be placed in a realistic work role and take on-screen actions to complete a work assignment or respond to a work challenge. To help us give us more ideas on how we can implement scenario-based learning in our lessons, we have with us today Dr. Nur Hazirah alias Seth from Universiti Teknologi Malaysia. Dr. Hazirah received her bachelor degree in engineering, majoring in chemical engineering from UITM, and her master's and PhD in mechanical engineering from Universiti Tun Hussein Onn, Malaysia. She also has industrial work experience working as a project manager cum coordinator for various shutdown projects in the oil and gas industry. The topic she'll be sharing today is development of innovative lesson plans related to Industry 4.0 using work process related curricula in line with demands of digitalization. Thank you, Dr. Hazirah, for taking time off to do this sharing session for the benefit of lecturers at our Malaysian polytechnics and community colleges. I would also like to express my gratitude for watching almost all the webinar slots we had this week, and I believe you'll be able to make connections from the other slots, to yours today. So over to you, Dr. Hazirah.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Uma, for the lovely introduction. So I hope everyone is doing great today. So, okay, without further ado, can I share my slide? All right. Okay, thank you, Dr. Uma. Okay, all right, thank you for the lovely introduction again, Dr. Uma. So basically, the topic itself is quite long, but let's get along with it, okay? So basically, the work process related curricula is circulating around scenario-based learning. And since the past few days, there are many experts explaining about scenario-based learning, such as a session with our Associate Professor, Dr. Isaac Santley from University of Mauritius. And he shared about how to upgrade our teaching skills using scenario-based learning method. So basically, my session will be just a slightly repetition, but with an additional part of how we can develop the lesson plan accordingly to the mapping of learning phases based on Robert Gagner model. Okay, so today I'll be sharing about what this scenario-based learning is all about, just the surface of it, because we have been listening and sharing by the experts for the past few days. And I believe that most of the participants today have at least a basic idea what is a scenario-based learning is all about. And next, I'll be sharing about how to design a lesson plan and an example of the application of scenario-based learning in the lesson plan. So before we go further into a more technical aspect of the scenario-based learning, let me start our session with the two quotes of wisdom, first from John Holt, which stated that learning is not the product of teaching, but instead, learning is the product of activities of learner. That is why we have to make sure that when we are teaching, we have to make sure that learning takes place, and learning should take place during the activities being conducted. And I also love one of the famous quote by Benjamin Franklin, which stated that, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, and involve me and I learn. So I love this quote because it supports and urges academicians to conduct active learning in our classes, which scenario-based learning is one of them. We have to engage and motivate the students to participate in our class during the discussion and also during the brainstorming activities. So previously during the rehearsal, Dr. Umar saw my video slide presentation, which will be presented in 2 weeks' time in a conference in Japan, of course, through online platform. And actually this quote, I put this quote in my application form, and it helped me put myself as one of the participants in the conference. It's a 5-day program with various Nobel laureates, and I'm very, very fortunate to be part of that conference. I'm looking forward to that conference in 2 weeks' time. All right, moving on. So what is a scenario-based learning? So scenario-based learning is one of the methods of active learning, of course, which to simulate a real-world practice, providing opportunities which may be difficult for students to experience within the confines of a course. So scenario-based learning could engage the participants in interactive scenarios that present authentic workplace experience and followed by a series of questions requiring the students to consider possible courses of action. So scenario-based learning suggests that pedagogical knowledge cannot be simply transferred to the students, but emerge from participation in the interactive social practices in the classroom. Okay, now, depending on the complexity of the scenario given, so creating a scenario-based learning can be time-consuming, especially us, the lecturer, the academician. But the end product can give the students an authentic learning experience which can both be challenging and motivating at the same time. But remember, even though when the first time we create a scenario-based learning, it is a repetitive process, so we can use it from time to time and just improve a little bit of the characteristic of it, okay? And another thing to remember about scenario-based learning activities is that they work best when we apply the task requiring the students to do decision making and critical thinking, especially in a complex situation. So this is where we as an academician plays an important role in the classroom. So the scenario given must be suitable with the students, and it must be in a complex situation where we need our prior experience working in the industry. Now, I must say, not all academicians have the privilege of working in industry prior to being a lecturer. Hence, engagement with the industry is important. We can collaborate with our friends who are currently working in industry, or we can collaborate with our speakers, our acquaintances that we know from the networking from this program or from other conferences who have wide experience in industry, and invite them to become a speaker in our lecture and provide the real world situation or real world scenarios to be embedded in our class. Now, moving on. Before we create or we strategize our lesson plan, we have to know what is the characteristic of scenario-based learning. What will the student gain from the activities? Scenario-based learning actually work the problem being discussed. It is an important opportunity for the student, and it's also an opportunity for us to teach and practice a skill using visual interactive problem-based context. So scenario-based learning can be initiated firstly, based on a problem, or you can start by a certain case or certain scenario or situation. So it depends on you. And scenario-based learning promotes critical thinking among the students, and it is important for the students to apply their prior experience, apply their knowledge on the subject being taught, use their critical thinking skill, problem-solving skills, and in a risk-free, close to real-world environment. So that is the keyword. Scenario-based learning is also well known as a learner-centric method or student-centered method, where the students could apply the skills acquired in real-life job situation rather than merely presenting theoretical information. So it is an opportunity for the student to discuss what are the problems that arise in that situation or in that scenario that promotes critical thinking to solve the problem and relate them with the real-life job situation. So I will explain this a little bit in depth with my example at the end of the slide. So, as I mentioned previously, scenario-based learning provides a risk-free environment. So that's the keyword, okay? Risk-free environment. So the student will feel more ease about the consequences of failure they might face. It can offer more room for failure, where they will learn the consequences of every wrong steps made during the discussion, and they can also share their findings with the other groups. So other groups, their colleagues, their group mates can see and can discuss and can observe what are the consequences of each step that they make in the decision making. Since it's a still risk-free environment, they will feel more ease in providing their opinion and provide suggestions to solve the stated problem. And last but not least, we have to make sure that when we are conducting scenario-based learning, we have to engage relevant context to the students so that they will be familiar with the environment, which helps connect the given problem with the consequences that they might face. Okay, let me show you a few pictures of the classroom setting for my students in arc and gas welding courses. So these students have a proper PPE, a proper working environment. They can sit in a proper posture, sit at ease, and weld two metal sheets together in various positions and joints. But actually, in reality, okay, in this industry, they have to weld in different working environment. So for example, in repairing car body parts, they might need to work in different posture. Sometimes they might need to bend a little bit, or crouch, or even standing the whole time. There are certain situations that they might become a submerged welder through extensive training, of course. And sometimes they are also asked to be working or welding in a confined space where they need to crouch or prone the entire time. So even so, my students, okay, Dr. Umar, since even though my background is in engineering, currently I'm attached under the Department of Technical and Engineering Education. So we train our students in a program of Bachelor of Technology with Education, where we expect them to become a teacher or instructor in vocational colleges or vocational institutions. and they still might have an opportunity to be working in to have a career in the industry also. So it is important for them to understand what kind of harsh environment or a stressful environment that they might face when they are working in the industry. And at the same time, when they become an instructor in the future, they should expect that their students will be working in industry. Hence, they also need to provide this kind of scenario for the students so that they understand what are the scenario of working industry really are. So scenario-based learning could be used as one of the methods to simulate the real-world environment to the students. Okay. Next, we have the strategy of conducting scenario-based learning. So basically, there are 5 steps. Started with the planning. Okay. In the planning stage, what we need to do is we need to identify the learning outcomes. It is important to identify what it is that we want the students to achieve upon the completion of the scenario. Okay, and then we work backwards from the learning outcomes to create the situation that will lead to the learning. And we also have to identify who are our target students, who are our target audience. Are they postgraduate students or undergraduate students? Because sometimes the undergraduate students might not all of them, might have a more narrow point of view because they are younger and they haven't been exposed to any working environment just yet. So the scenario that were given to the student should be in the context where the undergraduate student might have understand. Next, we have to define what are the purpose of our scenario-based learning. What do we want them to do? Do we want them to brainstorm or use their critical thinking skills? Or do we want them to do a decision making? So we need to define those first, all right? Next, we also need to determine what are the structure and the context of our scenario-based learning. So does it in the context of industry of education, for example, or in the context of manufacturing industry or building and construction industry? So it depends on us. Once we decide what are the context of a scenario, next we can structure to meet the purpose, structure our scenario-based learning to meet the purpose of our learning outcome. And last but not least in the planning stage is that we need to identify what are the type of scenario that we're going to use. Are we going to use a skill-based scenario, for example, a chef, a welder, or a teacher? Or maybe we want to use issue-based scenario, such as the current issue of flood in Malaysia. Or else we can also use problem-based type of scenario. We create a problem or we create a problem ourselves, or maybe we can use an actual problem in the context of scenario circulating around the student's life. Okay, but always remember, when we are planning all these things, learner engagement are more higher if the context of the scenario used involve judgment, decision making, troubleshooting, analysis, or social situations. All right. Okay. Next part. Then the next strategy, the next step will be designing our scenario-based learning. So once we have started, we have completed all the information in the planning stage, all right, we have to decide what are the medium to be used. Are we going to be delivering scenario-based learning face-to-face or in an online environment? We can proceed with the script development, the recording of the scenario, and decide what medium to be used, all right? What media that we could use. Are we going to use images or only audio or video? Or are we combining all of the resources, okay? And that's why, as I mentioned previously, okay, especially to us as academician or lecturer, preparing scenario-based learning is time-consuming, but remember, it is rewarding and motivating to the students at the same time. The next strategy is about development. So we can develop our scenario-based learning and make sure that we know what are the software and media requirements. So relate with our speakers previously in Festo. They have a very advanced we call it learning aid, Dr. Uma. So they have a simulation, they have the high technology. It's just that what we as an academician needs to do is embed the problem solving and critical thinking scenario using that learning aid. And next, we decide the selection of integration of audio, video, and images and other learning aids. Right? Once we have all that, we can choose the topic. based on the context of the scenario-based learning that we initially identified. So this is the first step of developing our scenario-based learning. Okay, once we have all these, we can start deliver our scenario-based learning in our teaching and learning. And when delivering, we started by initiating the trigger situation. So this trigger situation will encourage the student to use their critical thinking skills, and it must be in the context of a complex situation. So when we provide them with a complex situation or a complex scenario, that will become the trigger situation that will make them think critically to solve the problem. And of course, during the delivery, we have to monitor the process is being carried out. Is there a student who did not involve in the process? Is there any problem with the communication between the instructor, the lecturer, and the student? So we need to monitor all that. And afterwards, the students will present what are the outputs, okay, based on the discussion and the decision making during the activities. Then last but not least, the step in SBL, scenario-based learning strategy, is the evaluation. We assess the student either using formative assessment or summative assessment, and to make sure that the learning outcome is well met. We also need to do a peer review with our colleagues, okay, record the whole session and ask for opinion. We can ask for a reflection from the student, ask them their opinion after involving in our activities of scenario-based learning. What do they feel? What do they understand? Is there any room of improvement? So that is the reflection that we can ask from the student. So basically, this is the overall of the scenario-based learning, okay? Now, this is an example of a synchronous online session, how we plan our lesson plan for 2 hours, okay? Even though the Omicron cases suggest is very high right now, we have to foresee that online learning is a good option for us. So scenario-based learning can also be conducted online. When we start with the induction and the lecture, okay, a little bit introduction about the topic, the student activity here at step 4 can be embedded with scenario-based learning. And step 5 is the activities during the scenario-based learning, where the student do the discussion and can ask any question to the lecturer involving or solving the scenario-based learning. Okay, there are certain allocation time for each activities. The next one is an example of asynchronous online learning. So the difference between these both is that asynchronous involves with a pre-recorded lecture video, and every task needs to be written in a task base so that the students can assess without have any live interaction with the lecturer. So this is the difference between synchronous and asynchronous online learning, and the lesson plan, how can we design with the allocation of time for each session. So a few housekeeping before we design our scenario-based learning. First, when we plan our lesson plan, we need to upload these plans in the form of tasks to the student so that the student can have the access to the scenario-based learning activities. And it needs to have a series of tests written to the students so that the students can follow the instruction accordingly. We can use any platform that are easily accessible to our institution, and we can use to monitor our students' learning from that. And we just have to make sure that learning takes place regardless of any activities that we conduct online. Now, let me show you a simple example of a lesson plan. So this is a lesson plan you can create yourself, all right? It doesn't have to be in this kind of template. So it has all the details regarding the subject, date, time, and the platform that to be used. And we need to highlight what are the learning objectives and also the success criteria for the learning objective. It's important to highlight what are the students' prior knowledge needed by the student to tackle the learning objectives, and the level of thinking that we're going to achieve in this topic. So scenario-based learning, all right, is very, very recommended for higher order thinking skills, such as application, evaluation, or synthesis. It is not quite recommended for lower order thinking skills, such as understanding and remembering, because remember that scenario-based learning takes a lot of time to be conducted. So it's more proper if we can tackle the higher order thinking skills. Next, you can list down what are the applications that we're going to use, such as this is an online platform of Padlet, Jamboard. This is for the discussion platform. And what are the approach? The approach is student-centered or activity-centered. Of course, scenario-based learning are classified as both too. And the strategy is, in this case, is a narrow-based learning. And what are the method? The method is using virtual simulation, or you can use a live simulation. Maybe you want to explain the scenario yourself with the aid of a written task. And scenario-based learning can also be initiated by a case study and followed by brainstorming activities. Okay. The next lesson plan is on the delivery stage. I'm not going into details of this, okay? Let's go through in a glimpse of it. So you can list down what are set induction that you're going to conduct. Maybe you can start with short video or short storytelling. Proceed with the content, the concept development. So in the case of synchronized online learning, we can just conduct a live lecture. For asynchronous, you need to pre-record your video lecture. Next is conducting the scenario-based learning. This is where we restructure the content involving the activity, the mastery level of the students. And we can conduct a scenario-based learning in a series of lecture. It doesn't need necessarily to be completed in 2-hour lecture, okay? It doesn't necessarily to be that way. Sometimes you can complete the whole scenario-based learning within several weeks. Depends on the complexity of the topic being discussed. The next one is the formative assessment. As I mentioned in scenario-based learning strategy previously, we need to assess the student. We need to know whether the learning outcome has been achieved or not. We can also note what are the achievement of the learning outcome that has been achieved. And we also can note what are the assignment and homework or flipped classroom activities for the students. Okay, now this lesson plan is the mapping from the learning phase based on a Robert Gagnon model. So the first is gaining attention using the set induction. The second phase is the concept development, started with informing the learners of the objective, okay, stimulating the prior learning, what did they learn previously, presenting the stimulus and provide the learning guidance. So the phase 3 is about the concept enhancement, where we elicit the performance and provide the feedback. So this can be done using scenario-based learning, so as part of the activities. And afterwards, we assess the performance. We can use formative assessment at phase 4, all right, and enhance the retention and transfer knowledge in phase 5 using closure, homework assignment, or reflection, or any flipped classroom activities, okay? Now, let me give you an example of a lesson plan in one of the courses that I've taught this semester. So the subject is Industry and TVET, where the student will learn how the industry works, so theoretically, okay? So what are the functions in an organization, how an industry strives, how the operation works, and so on. So they also need to understand the role of industry and how can TVET institution and industry work together in enhancing human capital development, because they are future educators. So one of the learning objectives is that at the end of the lesson, the student should be able to evaluate clearly the role of industry in TVET human capital development. So the success criteria is that the students can reach a conclusion based on the discussion regarding what are the roles of industry in TVET human capital development, okay? So prior knowledge that they need in this topic is that they need to know what are the types of TVET institution in Malaysia. We have IKBN, we have IKN, we have vocational college, we have polytechnics, and so on. What are the current TVET programs being offered? What industry can TVET graduates be working in? So which industry that require the semi-skilled workers from TVET institutions? So they have been learning all this previously. So for this specific learning objective, so I'm going to conduct a scenario-based learning, which will be completed in 4 weeks' time. So my first approach of scenario-based learning is using a video. So, all right.
Nama saya Izati Ajira binti Muhammad Yusof. Saya berumur 22 tahun, asal Selama Perak. belajar dari SMK Sundabayu sampai PMR. Pas habis je vocational 4 tahun tu, 3 bulan training, terus bekerja kat sini. Seorang cikgu datang dari vocational, dia cakap dia punya gaji dia tinggi. Walaupun tak tahu langsung, tentang kepala ni kan, try apply, lulus. Perempuan memang tak ada seorang pun boleh ke Zati buat benda ni kan. Kebanyakan memang lelaki. Masa tu malu-malu sikit lah, segan. Sebab Zati pun tak tahu langsung pasal kos tu. Kos tu memang berat-berat lah. Mental, physical memang kena buat. Alhamdulillah, result pun okey, boleh diving. Sebenarnya Zati memang daripada kosong. Berenang pun tak tahu. Memang fikir nak bantu family. Kita bukan datang dari keluarga yang senang. Sebab kita duduk jauh lah dengan family. Penat lah, mesti nangis. Macam nak putus asa pun ada masa tu. Nak dapat kerja sekarang pun memang payah lah. Kita kerja memang air kotor, air yang gelap. Sehari tu tak sekali kita kerja sebulan. Habis the job, habis lah. Selalu gaji yang tinggi ni kebanyakan risiko dia tinggi. Dia ikut tahap kita punya kemahiran. Orang macam saya yang tak berminat belajar, okey, kita jangan ingat kita tak pandai, tak ada CJ yang tinggi-tinggi, kita tak boleh berjaya. Nak berjaya kita kena berusaha je. Kadang tu orang yang pandai belajar tinggi-tinggi pun susah juga nak dapat kerja kadang tu. Mak Aisyah selalu bagi semangat, ingatkan selalu jangan lupa solat lah. Rezeki tak akan datang bergolek, duit pun tak datang melayang. Kita kena cari diorang, tak perlu sebab saya kena teruskan. Aku mesti buat benda ni, aku nak bantu family aku. Satu dia dah semua ingat, dah putus asa lah, kita kena berusaha. Izin untuk ambil kos profession ni keseluruhan dia lebih kurang 48,000. Kita training untuk open water, part 1, part 2, wedding dengan cutting lah. First time masuk laut, memang panik lah. Selalu tengok kita punya depth gauge, macam pada tank kita. Sebab kemungkinan boleh habis. Kalau dekat darat, api dia kita rasa panas tau. Kalau dalam air, kita rasa panas. Rasa sejuk lah. Ada job dekat Navy, job tu malam. Memang gelap lah. Masa tu cuma torchlight, angin kuat, hujan dulu kan. Nak pasang tu kena ada cara dia kan. Hanya satu grating yang kecil je, tapi dia punya berat tu memang berat lah. Susah gila, semacam nak down pun ada tau. Sebab kita nak settlekan projek kan. Kena bekerjasama. Bila dah siap je memang lega gila lah. Alhamdulillah. Bagi rezeki ni masing-masing. Yang susah nak dapat kerja mungkin diorang tak banyak mencari kot. Tunjukkan kita punya attitude yang baik lah. Kalau orang dah kenal kita, dah rajin ke apa, orang akan ambil kita lagi. Macam Raja sendiri pun banyak benda yang tak tahu lagi. Sambil bekerja sambil belajar. Kita tak boleh memilih lah, terlalu memilih pekerjaan. Mungkin kerja ni kita tak minat, tapi zaman sekarang susah dapat kerja. Kita nak dapat apa benda yang kita nak. Walaupun kita tak suka benda tu, kita kena try. Sampai lama kita akan jadi suka benda tu.
Okay, so that is the video that you can example of a scenario-based learning. So first, we ask the student what do they understand from the video of the Izzati videos just now. We have provided a scenario for them, so we can start by probing them, asking them whether do they understand what the video is all about. So remember to hold the 3WH question: the who, the where and what. So the key from the video is that we are talking about Izzati, who are graduate from a vocational college, and the issue is that she has successfully secured a high salary job as being an underwater welder despite being a female welder. Now next, what we're going to do from that scenario is that we are going to start with a complex situation or a complex decision making using real life characters. Okay, so okay. Okay, we're going to introduce with a real life character, which is the character is a vocational instructor, and as a teacher in an institution, how they're going to make sure that they can produce a more talent like Izzati. So based on the video, they need to figure out how to make sure vocational college has high graduate employability, how they're going to make sure that vocational college have desired a skill needed by the industry. We expect them to do what they could explore the possible collaboration between industry and institution, and to evaluate the role of industry in TVET human capital development. So it reflects our learning outcome. We can expect them to go further in their discussion. They can do an interview with an industry expert, or they can do a short survey and site visit to a certain industry listed previously. That's why I said that scenario-based learning can be lasted in a few weeks. It doesn't have necessarily to be completed in 2 hours time. And upon discussing and reaching conclusion with their group members, they will present the outputs. Okay, that is an example of a very theoretical topic. So let's take a look at another scenario which are more technical, started with the learning objective, which is the student is expected to design AR mobile app for basic pneumatic topic. So learning objective focuses more on skills because we expect the student to be able to design and develop AR mobile apps for basic pneumatic. Okay, Dr. Umar, the difference between what Festo has recommended yesterday, using learning pneumatic using a very high-tech technology. As in UTM, for the TVET in UTM, because we nurture them to become a teacher, instead of learning the advanced part of pneumatic, what they need to do is how to make sure that their future students understand the basic part of it. So that's why these are one of the assignments for the students in UTM, which is to develop an AR mobile apps for the topics in the vocational college. Okay, so this is also the scenario that I might be completed in a few weeks' time. So the scenario basically is about an AR mobile app, say, an existing one actually, previously developed by the student themselves. So the AR mobile apps for the topic of basic pneumatic for vocational students, an experimental study has been conducted involving 5 vocational colleges in Johor, but the apps was perceived unable to meet the intended purpose, which is to improve the students' attainment in basic pneumatic. So this is an example, okay, as a case-based scenario where we're exploring a specific unique case of an AR apps. So as I mentioned previously, highlight the WH question. Okay, what is the story all about? So the scenario is about AR mobile apps did not meet the intended purpose. The scenario occurred in 5 vocational college in Johor, and who are involved in this scenario is the developer, which is the student. We also has injected the trigger situation in the scenario simultaneously, where the apps didn't meet the intended purpose. So that's the trigger, that's the problem. Okay. Now, we have introduced the students to the scenario. What we are going to do next is we introduce the real character to the students. The real character is the content developer for the AR mobile apps, which is the students. And they were given RM 100,000 ringgit. And another real scenario character is the BPTV, Bahagian Pendidikan Latihan Teknik Vocational KPM, who provide the allocated budget. Now, what is the process of problem solving involved in this scenario? To redevelop and re-evaluate the mobile apps, making sure that it meets the purpose of improving students' attainment in basic pneumatic. So the students need to brainstorm in group, discuss and design and improve AR mobile apps for this purpose. Okay, next, we need to tell them, that they are assigned as a leader of a group of people. So what are the process involved in the problem solving? It started with identify the problem, okay, based on the feedback of the user, find out what is lacking with the existing problem, existing apps, redesign, okay, the storyboard of the mobile apps, making sure that it meet the intended purpose. And they could also do a short survey of the expectation of the students towards the newly developed apps. Can also survey the teachers, for example. So they need to redevelop and reevaluate the newly designed mobile apps. Okay, that is the overall problem solving process for this specific scenario. So upon discussion, they need to present their paperwork pertaining the whole plan and structure of develop and re-evaluate the design, the mobile apps. So it requires a lot of decision making in this process. For example, the delegation of work, the division of budget based on the delegated tasks, and many others. So we can also observe the decision-making skills among the students, whether they tend to choose the easiest path for a solution or they are brave enough to put on some risk in their solution. So this, everyone, okay, is an example of a scenario-based learning that we can conduct in our classes. So it is the preparation of the preparation of scenario is quite easy using an image only, okay? And we can assign also this as an assignment or in an in-class activity. So it depends on our creativity how to conduct scenario-based learning. So another example of scenario-based learning is that we can give them one scenario and ask for a feedback for each decision they made. So based on the scenario that we choose, give them 2 options. So for example, discuss what will happen if you choose option A, what happen if you choose option B. How you divide the groups entirely based on your creativity. Okay, so there are 1,000 ways to divide our students. Just select the most exciting method. So upon choosing the options, they will weigh the consequences of each action. So which has less risk and which benefits more. This is the decision-making and critical thinking process occurred simultaneously. They can't simply make a decision without critically weighing the consequences of their action. So next, based on each option, provide another scenario with another 2 options. Then they will repeat the same course of action until they reach the learning outcome. This is also called decision-making tree. And the option provided does not necessarily it doesn't have to be right or wrong answer. You can also put an option of left or right option for the answer which did not have right or wrong answer. I hope you understand that. Okay. So remember the characteristic of scenario-based learning. We need to provide an environment where the students are able to make decisions in a risk-free environment. For example, the scenario of first one is that related to safety. So if you choose option A, might have there will be accident or explosion going to happen. Option B, there will be less risk, but still it's not a proper decision. So they can still make a decision because this is a risk-free environment. It's just a simulation. But I do agree, a little pressure might help boost some productivity, but we are promoting critical thinking among the students. So this is where we can see their true potential. Okay. All right, let's take a look at an example of the learning objective evaluating the responsibility of working in a confined space. So this is someone for my welding students. So in the industry, they might be working in a confined space. Okay, let's take a look at the video first. All right.
So viewers, please put in your questions into the chat box, yeah, so that we can ask them. Okay, all right, let's watch this video.
Okay, so the learning objective is evaluating the responsibility of working in a confined space. So let's see how the decision-making tree looks like. Okay, so that is the scenario. Okay, the scenario and also the decision-making tree. So we gave them 2 options. So which option that they need to decide, and afterwards followed by the second scenario. Okay, based on the video, all right, the scenario is that the company are awarded with shutdown project in Petronas, Malaysia, Terengganu, and so on. So actually this is based on my experience. Okay, so based on the scenario, the job scope requires the welder to perform welding in a confined space. So we have tackled the WH question, the who, what, and where. So the injecting the trigger situation is that the specific personnel to be working in a confined space did not have a valid permit. So his permit is expired already. Okay. Okay, let me share the slide. Okay, so specifically, additional to that, okay, the worker don't have a valid confined space permit, so that his permit is expired, and he is the only person who have it. So that is the trigger situation, a complex situation. So siapa yang akan buat kerja dalam confined space tu? Who should they select as owner of the company, or maybe as a project manager, and so on. Okay. The real character has been injected, so they need to decide who will assign the personnel to, the one who have a expired permit, or the one who have without even the permit. Okay, actually both decision is unlikely recommended if you notice. So we are trying to make the students make a highly unrecommended decision because for your information, when we assign a personnel to be working in a confined space, AESP valid permit is required. AESP stands for authorized intern and SP stands for standby person. So these both persons need to attend a training course and have a valid permit. So the course lasted for around, for example, for 2 years. So after 2 years, you need to renew them, for example. Okay. Which decision has less risk? The one yang the permit is expired, or the one who didn't have any permit at all? There are so many room of discussion here we can make with the students. So many things that we can learn from a single decision. We can discuss the implication, discuss the consequences, and they will learn. After the discussion of the first scenario and the consequences of each option that they make for each decision, we can continue with the second scenario. So the second scenario, if you assign the person with expired permit, what should you do? Do you proceed with mobilize the personnel first, or renew the permit at the same time, or renew the permit first, and once being renewed, then you mobilize the personnel? Actually, the students require a lot of information seeking regarding the compulsory entry procedure into a site or into a shutdown project, where actually you need to have every permit being renewed first, then you can mobilize the personnel. So there's a right or wrong decision there. Okay, so this option has right or wrong, and we can discuss with the students the consequences of the action. Actually, next, when we are doing this activity, the information seeking, the decision making, the critical thinking will finally help them to evaluate the responsibility of working in a confined space. All right, so that is the scenario of the example of scenario-based learning, the third one. Okay, this is my last slide. Okay, Dr. Umar. So remember, learning is pleasurable, but doing is the height of enjoyment. So this is me. So Dr. Umar cakap, this is me with my cucu. Actually, this is not my cucu lah. Okay, this is my student. So her name is Fatihah. Fatihah a few days before datang dengan dia punya husband Hakim. Hakim and Fatihah are both my students. So the story behind this picture is that I conduct active learning in the class, where actually during the activity is a jigsaw puzzle combined with a gallery wall. So in a gallery wall, they need to be together and go to each station in the classroom and visited each checkpoint to collect all the jigsaw puzzle. So during that day, I assigned both of them in the group. So actually sepanjang 4 tahun mereka belajar, that is the first time they are assigned to be in a group. Biasanya mereka akan pilih group sendiri, and of course Teha ada kawan dia, Hakim ada kawan dia. So I unintentionally put them in a group lah. Dia tak bermaksud apa-apa lah. So from there onwards, because they are in the final semester, so rupanya mereka start getting to know each other, and after they graduate, they get married, they have a beautiful son there, and they came with a very good news that both of them successfully strive the interview with the SPP previously, and dah dapat pun panggilan posting untuk bekerja. So it's a very good news. So remember, learning is pleasurable, but doing is the heart of enjoyment. Not just enjoyment of achieving the learning outcome, but actually it is more than that. Okay, so that's all, Dr. Umar. We can proceed advance to the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Hazirah, for sharing. I feel, firstly, congratulations. I think many of us who are watching, I think we really enjoyed your session. We could really see how, you have actually coped, the layers, the complex layers of what scenario-based learning is. So scenario-based learning isn't new. It's something that has existed since the 1970s. Tapi, why do you think tak ramai takers untuk scenario-based learning?
Okay, pertama macam saya cakap lah, because of not every lecturer has the privilege of having industrial experience. So scenario based learning is beyond the context of theoretical. So kebetulan rezeki saya, I've been teaching welding, so it's very much related with my previous experience. So these are based on my experience working in industry. So I believe that to those who did not have the privilege of having working industry, grab a friend, connect and make collaboration with the industry, because this is what we are for, to expose the students to the real life, real work job environment.
Yeah, true. I really agree with that suggestion. So if you are in the industry, tak apa kata tak ada tak ada the industrial experience, but try to get friends. You won't believe it, rezeki kita orang kat industri tu, they're just waiting to share sebenarnya. Cuma mereka tidak diberi peluang. And if they diberikan peluang, your students will benefit and you also will benefit. So this also comes back to our, a few slots ago we said that, these are the competences we want from our students, but we ourselves need to take that, that leap of faith. We need to make changes into our pedagogical skills, right? All right, thank you for answering that. Okay, the second question I have is, how about using SBL embedded simultaneously with other active learning strategies? Like just now you mentioned about gallery walk, so that's also an active learning strategy. We actually brought two of your students together and they have a family right now, right? So what are the other active learning strategies that can be used together with SBL?
Okay, other active learning strategies is that you also use a flipped classroom. So for example, the task with a conference space just now. So remember that the prior knowledge they need before they explore the responsibility of working in confined space is the procedure. What are the permit approval by entry supervisor and permit issuer, and what are the safety requirement by DOSH and so on. So actually you can ask the questions to the students, ask them to collect any information, to read, to digest, to dig more before the class. And during the class, you just conduct the scenario-based learning, give the video, and you do the discussion with the students. So that's why flipped classroom is also important, just like what Dr. Umar presented during your presentation 2 days ago, right? So flipped classroom is that before we dig all the information, ask the student to dig all the information, and the discussion occurs during the class. That is where learning take place. Learning take place bukan dengan reading the notes or doing the assignment. Learning takes place during the activity in the class. So that is very important. That's why when bila kita buat scenario-based learning, actually there are a lot of others. That is just one of the option. So during the discussion, you can boleh buat debate. So for example, macam kita bagi satu scenario, tadi ada 2 option. Okay, you go for option 1, I go for option 2. So pernah sekali saya buat debate in the class. So just sharing my experience. Of course lah, sebenarnya tajuk ni sebenarnya nak suruh student, actually is a subjek umum untuk student communicate sahaja. So the topic is very simple, polygamy. But of course lah, memang is very, semualah student suka kan topik tu. But then you have to twist it. So during that topic, the male student needs to debate that they did not agree with polygamy, and the girl students need to sokong the polygamy. So you can, it was a very hilarious session. Boleh nampaklah bagaimana yang the female student memang betul-betul fight lah for polygamy, and the male student just laugh out loud. Okay, so actually it depends on your creativity, macam mana you nak embed as other active learning class, activities in scenario-based learning.
Thank you for sharing that hilarious example. I can imagine what would have happened in that class. Right? Topik tu memang topik favorite antara mereka tu. Alright. The third question I have is, so the preparation of a virtual simulation to propose scenario, it's actually quite time consuming, quite hard. Even though you can be an experienced lecturer, but other yang technophobic. Okay, so do you have other suggestions how to prepare the scenarios in a more, not so canggih way, but scenarios in an easier but still effective, but not using, low-tech technologies.
Okay. So let me ask you one question, Dr. Umar. So my video, do you category that as a medium tech, low tech?
Which low tech? That's low tech, I guess.
So that's low tech. Low tech for me, even as a Gen X, it took around 2 to 3 hours to prepare. Okay, so that is a low tech. So just imagine how the even the more experienced lecturer, the baby boomers, okay, and remember that we are not content creator, we are academician, we are lecturer. But remember, our students, they are Gen Y, okay, they are millennials. So this is just at the tip of their fingers. So there are many of our students who has made a side income as content creator, as content developer. So they can create this short video. So for us, it's like 3 to 4 hours, and for them maybe they can complete it within half an hour. So this is where we can teach our students to become an entrepreneur, creating the job themselves. So you can create, identify a few what we call it, yang potential students yang ada bakat. Okay, ask them to register their company, okay, buka SSN, create as a content creator and content developer, and the client is us, the lecturer. The client is us, the academician. So you see, the content doesn't have to be a formal. It doesn't, as long as it can deliver the intended purpose, it can deliver the scenario, it should do it. So it doesn't have to be recorded formally, like we are recording the moves or we're recording the micro-credential, no. So when we, as the Gen X or the baby boomer, we make use the skills by our Gen Y students and our millennial students. They have so many resources, but even so, we have many commitments compared, okay, our commitments also compared to them. So even though this is time consuming, kalau kita share rezeki kita kepada students, we pay them instead. Untuk buat, I believe that it will be beneficial to both parties lah. So walau yang macam mana saya cakap, I would like to encourage them to buat active learning, to prepare for scenario based learning, because it's a repetitive process. Hari ni boleh guna untuk di semester, the next one you can guna for next semester. You can just change a little bit info dekat dalam scenario based learning, but it's a repetitive process and very experiential learning for the students. So one of the effort is we can make use of our Gen Y. Make sure kalau kita minta tolong mereka tu, is not of to the benefit of ourselves, but to benefit of them also.
So that's why even here Puan Habibah Ramali, she has mentioned, lecturer yang berumur, how are they going to apply to young students? I think yes, by asking for help. And sometimes kalau kita buat just pen paper, kalau dia boleh lukis, basic stuff, and then kita deliver bagi kat student, and student can make it digitalized, and then it can be used for the whole class. So that gives them the experience to develop their own resources. And I also believe that you are teaching pre-service teachers, betul? And pre-service teachers, if they are given the ilmu to create their own digital materials, this is a lifelong skill lah. They can use it whenever they want. So kalau mereka diberikan tak kisah kursus apa pun, tapi dah ada basics of scenario based learning, they can apply it. Like kalau diberikan subjek pendidikan Islam ke, diberikan subjek bahasa Inggeris, bahasa Melayu, tak kisah subjek apa, matematik pun is actually in the storytelling. So if they get the correct scenarios, they can really deliver the content more effectively. Alright, so that also goes to our last question here. Does scenario based learning work for different types of fields of studies based on your experience, Dr. Nur Hazirah?
Okay, based on my experience, so my experience learning engineering for my master, my PhD, and also my undergraduate. So yes, it can apply to all types of field of study. So engineering is, even though it's very tough, that's why I said scenario-based learning for engineering part, you need to engage with the industry themselves. So for my case, for the example of scenario-based learning I'm giving you is circulate around education. That's why you can just use the low-tech learning aid only. Tetapi kalau macam contoh for advanced courses, the engineering, the chemical processes. So how do you make sure that the student understand what is the process involved in that? So nak tak nak memang kena engage dengan industri, bagi dia gambar, oh rupanya proses pelan ni, dia punya part besar ni. Dalam gambar part kecil macam ini je, but actually the part is bigger. So dalam confined space, the one that I showed you, confined space tu tengok, oh kecil je. Actually the confined space, dia punya diameter sahaja is 10 meter. Okay, so kena bagi mereka gambaran yang lebih realistic. So yes, it can apply to all field of study. So even medicine depends on kita punya creativity and engagement with the industry.
So even yang Prof Isaac Santelli pun, he showed us the scenario-based learning yang about airline ticketing tu. So he said memang they work together with this company which is a tour company if I'm not mistaken, and then they got those scenarios from them. So actually it's really your creativity, and walaupun dia airline ticketing, so bukan saja budak tourism ataupun budak yang belajar front desk office, dia orang even pelajar-pelajar ambil subjek bahasa Inggeris, bahasa Melayu, bahasa Cina, bahasa Tamil, you can actually use that same scenario, but just to practice languages maybe. So actually the potential is just it's huge. It's really your creativity as teachers, as instructors. All right. So I guess that's all the time that we have. So on behalf of the Department of Polytechnic and Community College Education, I would like to say thank you for the sharing session just now. Thank you for saying yes when I invited you to give a talk on scenario-based learning. I remember I called you and I was waiting for my daughter, and I said, okay, let's make this quick call to this person, and then we spoke and we clicked immediately. And I'm so glad that you are in the same wavelength as me in terms of scenario-based learning and how important it is, and also you can actually you can also implement it in a flipped classroom approach as well. So we will now go for a short break and see you all at 10:30 with our next speaker, Prof. Sukri Sawat, a colleague of Dr. Hazirah, with his topic on usage of soft skills learning and teaching courses related to Industry 4.0. Also, please join us at 2:30 to get some insights on upgrading specific technical competences for industry changes due to Industry 4.0 from Mr. Walker Schmidt, the head of Asia Pacific Pesto Didactics Southeast Asia. At 3:45, we will hear the closing or a wrap-up from Dr. Zana Ashar bin Zana Abidin, Director of the Instructional and Digital Learning Division, BIPD. So let me just take a quick picture. So let me just take a quick picture of you because I'm actually preparing the wrap-up punya slides. Okay, so are there any questions? I don't see any questions. So kalau nak tinggalkan apa-apa komen dalam chat box, sempat je Dr. Hazirah untuk baca juga. Alright, kejap. Okay. Alright, thank you Hazirah. Have a good day ahead. I hope to work with you in future. Let me know. Anything. Scenario-based learning and flipped classroom. I think dah dapat kita dah dapat nurture a lot of interest among our audience hari ni. Thank you so much Hazirah. Take care.
Alright, thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Okay,
Bye.
alright.
Okay, bye.